You're watching FiOS 1 News. I'm Nancy Ward. Well, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this year it seems to be under the magnifying glass in light of the Ray Rice scandal. The now infamous video leaked by TMZ shows former NFL player and New Rochelle native Ray Rice knocking his then-fiancée unconscious in an elevator. Now, that video led to several players being outed for their alleged domestic violence incidents. Joining us now to talk about domestic violence is Ann Ellsworth of the Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center. Ann, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, a very serious topic, and on the topic of the media, families, everyone's minds. My first question would be, you know, the NFL found itself at the hot topic center of all of this.
Absolutely.
Have calls been escalated in the center, or what is the general reaction, especially nowadays?
It's always a mixed reaction. Sadly, we're always looking for our numbers to go up. We want more victims to find us. We want folks to feel comfortable to reach out. But oftentimes, when there's a lot of attention to domestic violence, it's really wonderful for the folks that need to be educated. But for victims, it calls a lot of attention to their everyday life.
And you said before, we were discussing, some of them might not realize that they're being abused physically.
Exactly. Right.
It's mentally.
It's the other forms of abuse that don't always jump out, that people learn to live with. And when you get to that point where you go, oh my God, I'm one of those people, I'm a victim, that's when you start to think about making the call. But it's not always safe. There are many victims that know they're victims of domestic violence that are working on it every day to try and find safety and to get strong enough to be able to make that change and move away. The most dangerous time for a victim is the moment they decide to leave. And we all know that in our work. And so we really try hard to not give them a timeline. Every victim knows when they can leave. And so when Ray Rice stuff came out, and we've all been talking about it, folks that have never talked about domestic violence are talking about it. All of us who know of people who we believe are victims, we want them to leave. We want, this is happening to you, please, let's get out. Every victim needs to come to that place on their own. And so we don't necessarily see a spike immediately. We may see a spike over time as it becomes out of the spotlight. It's a little safer for victims, I think, at that time to start to think about their next step.
And why do you think wives, especially Ray Rice's wife now, Janae, why do you think they stay? I mean, just being up there on the stage, supporting, even after seeing the video that has been shown for weeks now in the media.
Right.
Why? What is it?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it's been all over the media recently, why we stayed, why I stayed. Every victim has their own reason, and it's not always safe. We have no idea what goes on behind the doors. We have no idea what goes on after that camera's gone, after this stops being the highlight of the of media right now, which is wonderful because the attention's so important. But they all have their own reason for staying. Safety. People want to make it work. They want to know that this is a personal relationship. If a victim was struck by a stranger in an elevator, this would not even be spoken about because that perpetrator would be addressed, brought to jail, and brought to justice.
Right.
Because it's a relationship that we put all of our heart into, we have our own reasons for being there. And so a victim may not feel safe to leave. A victim has to maintain that relationship with the abuser while they're going through their process to feel strong enough. Because we'll never be able to tell a victim when it's time for them to leave.
Right. Now, speaking of that, what are some of the signs to look for, especially if a friend, or a family member, or sister, anybody?
I mean, well, the physical signs are the obvious ones, but, you know, domestic violence is so many more things. It's that, over time, degrading of a human being's self-esteem to the point where they don't believe that they have any other choice or they deserve anything better, which they all do. So, isolation from friends and family, tracking every movement on text, on phones, not being able to be out of their sight. No access to financial resources, isolation in the home, no cars. And so people in your life that you've had relationships with, as we start to see a victim change in their involvement with the community, in how they take care of themselves, if there's an eating, you know, if they're eating more, eating less, sleeping more, sleeping less, a lot of that can be generalized depression that people go through that are not victims of domestic violence.
Right.
So as an outside objective person, we don't always know. But we can ask in a safe way.
Speaking of that, and thank you, biggest question, especially to our viewers at home, what are some of the resources that are available, especially, and talk about your center?
The Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center, and it is a mouthful, trying to say it all. We've been in Mayapack up in Putnam for 35 years.
Okay.
And we provide a domestic violence shelter, which is hidden away for 15 victims and their children who are fleeing violence. And then we have a counseling center that provides advocacy, helps you go to court, get an order of protection, file a police report, counselors and therapists and support groups that help the victim decide, have a place to decide what their next step is, what all their options are, how they can receive services, what can the criminal justice system help them with, what do they need to do for themselves, save money, get IDs, make a plan for themselves that makes a safety plan so that they know what their next step is going to be.
Again, what's your website, Ann, so we can let viewers know at home?
pnwwrc.org.
Great. Ann Ellsworth, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your help and hope that this issue comes to light even more so.
Even more. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ann. We're going to be right back.